Pastor Walker. Okay, great. So what we'll do during that first segment, background experiences that you know, and what we'll do, that's a 6-minute segment, and we'll have the Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the impact of secular and Christian music on youth. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the impact that Christian music and secular music is having on youth, and especially African American youth. Pastor Kay Walker, who will give us some information in reference to Mr. Larry Polo, as well as Reginald Williams. And let me welcome all three of you to the show this morning. But Pastor Walker, since you know these individuals more than I think that any of us know them, let's have you to sort of give us some statements in reference to who they are, and then we'll be able to talk to them in reference to that.
Okay. Well, Dr. Haney, first of all, thanks again for allowing us the opportunity to be on your show. Your show is all a very informative show, and it reaches a broad audience, and we're just thankful to be here. With me today is Mr. Larry Polo Rayford and Mr. Reginald Ballhead Williams, and they that's the names now.
That sort of summarizes them up. Oh, very good.
And we got some very important subject matter to talk about today, Dr. Haney, concerning the impact of secular rap and Christian rap music on our youth today. And these are gospel Christian rappers and stuff, and they can tell you more about themselves than I can, and I'll just kind of yield to them at this point.
Okay, Mr. Larry Polo, why don't you give us some information about your background, education, experiences, and after which Mr. Reginald Williams will do the same.
Yes, sir. I was born in Ben Harbor, Michigan, raised in Chicago, Illinois. Also, let me see, I was in the streets most of my life, pretty much all of my life. Gang banged. I was gang banging for 20 years of my life, part of one of the biggest organizations that ever was in Chicago as well. And I also did secular music as well. Educational wise, I dropped out of school my 10th grade year, and then I just went back to get my GED last year, and now I'm in college at American Baptist College. So I'm what you call an ex-gangster to now one of God's disciples.
Very good. Mr. Williams?
I'm from Nashville, and I was incarcerated at 19 and dropped out of high school in my 10th grade year as well, and went to prison and found God, and God showed me how to get my life together. So I went to school there, graduated some various classes, various schools, and got my barber's license, and so that's what I do now for money, and just gave God my life, man, and He's dealing with us. You know?
And so, Pastor Walker, we believe that gospel music and rap music and secular music, all of this work together. But why don't you give us some idea in terms of what they represent in terms of the music industry?
Well, when you look at music itself, you know, I'm a 59-year-old black man, and when I was coming up, you know, our music, it was James Brown, the OJs, and they had some influences, and a lot of the music during the 60s and the early 70s and things like that, they were very motivational, inspiring lyrics in the music, and then and it had an impact on our lives, you know, and then in this particular area, when you talk about rap music and when you talk about secular rap music, there's a portion of that rap music, secular rap music, that's very degrading, and it sends a message and a signal. And number one, it's a false signal, because you look at people like Jay-Z and you look at people like 50 Cent and stuff like that, and if you went to their house, you know, you probably had to go through 7 or 8 layers of security just to get into the gate, you know. Right. But then they're projecting an image as if they're out here gangster, gang banging, and living the kind of lifestyle that you formerly lived in the past. And it's sending a bad signal, and our youth are grabbing a hold to that. So I think what God is doing in this particular dispensation of time, He has created gospel rap so that our youth can be reached with the gospel through rap, you know. And these guys are the example and of the epitome of that particular genre of music, because they're reaching a lot of people.
Very good. Mr. Polo, let's, over the last minute we have in this segment, let's start off by, what do you think about secular music and rap music? Give us a sort of a summary of that, and then we'll be able to start with Mr. Williams when we come back.
Summarizing it all is that now I really do say that is the music that defines demonic spiritual movement, more so than anything now, because it's more of, it influences our children to do things that they don't have no business doing. And I know, because like I said, in my life, in gang banging and things that I used to do, that's what we used to get a rush off of, was that secular music. And that rushed us to even do more dirt, as we call it, or do more crimes and the ignorant stuff that we was doing. So, you know, so I do understand that.
And so we're getting ready for our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll start with you, Mr. Williams, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is the impact of secular and Christian rap music on today's youth. And Mr. Williams, I think, can give us some information in reference to the negative impact of this music. Now, we know that it might have some positive impacts, but for what we know, most folks look at it from that negative rap music, that negative this and et cetera. Talk about the negative impact of that rap music, Mr. Williams.
I think we have to be very aware that everything is spiritual. You know, we're either giving off a positive spirit or a negative spirit. And the music is, whether it's country, hip hop, or rock, or heavy metal, or whatever it is, we have to ask ourselves once we're listening to it, what type of mood is this song putting me in, you know? And if that's hip hop, you know, if that song is giving you a negative feeling, then it's negative music. And there's a lot of the, you know, negative connotations in the music and the lyrics. And if you look at the imagery in the videos, a lot of it is negative. A lot of it, you know, from degrading of women to, you know, just flashiness that deals with a lot of worship of jewelry and, you know, money and what message is it sending our people? Is it helping our community? Is it raising our community? Is it helping us lower crime? You know, in actuality, a lot of it is just really, it's really tearing down our community and tearing down the very fibers of our families.
Well, now, Mr. Polo, if we feel that way about this music, why is it that somehow our young people are attracted to the music?
Same, like I said, going back to, I can only speak of myself. I was once ignorant. I was once injured, indigent. And so I know exactly how that feels to be. And not just that, it's going against the grain. That makes sense. It's going against the grain. It's going against everything that everybody else, you know, that we talk about, that our people fought for, our forefathers fought for, things of that nature. And let's just be honest, it seems like it's easier to do what's wrong than it is to do what's right. Now that's in the eye of the beholder. You know, now it's different, especially with me walking on this side. But when I was walking on that side, it seemed much easier just to go out and rob somebody, hit somebody over the head and take what was theirs. Put my gun to somebody's head and say, you know, this is mine, I want what's yours. It don't matter what's in my pocket, I want what's in your pocket. I'm gonna spend what you got today. It was easier for me to go bully somebody and make them feel just as, you know, small as I am. Plus, I had what they call a short man complex. So, you know, it was easier for me to go bully those people that were bigger than me. You know, and that's what rap did. It gave me that sense of, you know, power. I'm the man, I'm the power.
False sense of power.
False sense of B is a B. You know, I call women out their names. And if I do that, I'm in domain. You see what I'm saying? That's my dominance. If I let a woman know that she's a female dog or she's a garden tool, and then not just telling her this and calling her this, but treating her like this, then I'm the man. Because, you know, the guys in my hood where I was from, they used to fight with their women, beat their women up. Them and their women would fight in the street. So I thought that was what's up. I thought it was me and my girl, that's what we supposed to do. When I come home, I'm supposed to smack her a couple times, you know, and that's what I thought I was supposed to do, because that's what I seen from what we call the OGs, the older cats. So that's what rap music told us to do. You see what I'm saying? To so many emphasis to be a pimp, you know, to be a player, you know, and treat women like prostitutes. You know what I'm saying? To go out here and get this money by any means necessary. Malcolm X cliche, but not what Malcolm X meant, you know, to a whole nother scenario. And that's what we did. So, and I know it because that's what I did. Like I said, if I went to go do something, I'd be bumping Tupac or bumping Ice Cube, NWA, and that would get me so hyped. Now I'm ready to go do something. You know what I'm saying? That even gives me more of what I was already gonna do anyway. It gives me more momentum to go do it. And that's what it does. So it influences our children in so many ways, because this is all they talk about. All you hear now is gang banging. A lot of these cats ain't even gang bangers. A lot of these cats are in college, they go to school, they live like Pastor Walker said, they live a whole nother life. You know, it's cool to pack a pistol. A lot of these cats don't pack guns, they security do. You know, that's what our young kids don't understand. And not just that, the cases that they're trying to fight, you know, because you have a young guy to go out here and commit murder and think he can get off, but he don't have Lil Wayne money. He don't have Jay-Z money. So he don't have Johnny Cochran. Right. Johnny Cochran ain't no longer living. You see what I'm saying? But they have a sense of thinking that this is the easiest way to do it. But once you take a life, you can't give it back. Right. And that's what they fail to realize. And some of them don't care. They have an I don't care attitude until they end up behind them prison walls where we both been. You know what I'm saying? They end up behind them walls doing a couple years or more than a couple, your lifetime. When you realize that you're doing a life and you're never getting out, then it finally hits you. You know, and that's the influence that the hip hop culture has on our children now, because it has our young women degrading themselves. It has our young men degrading our women as well as themselves. It has our young men hurting each other and thinking it's cool to do that and not caring for one another. Everything that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Pratt, all them brothers, Hugh Newton, all them brothers, and even Jesus died for, I know that they're rolling over. You know, I know that when they look at us, you know, maybe when they look at us, they might be smiling now. But when they looked at me and my old lifestyle, Reggie and his old lifestyle, and just cats that are doing what they're doing now, they're like, wow, this is what I died for. And I know it has to hurt them.
Pastor Walker, now, you've had an opportunity to deal with many individuals involved in these negative points of view. What do you see, and how do you think that we might be able to deal with that as a community?
Well, you know, not only have I dealt with a number of individuals that's been impacted by this negative thing, but I've been impacted by it and affected by it myself, you know, having lived a lifestyle as well, a negative lifestyle. There is an important aspect I would like to touch on is the church. The church is a big hurdle that these Christian rappers, gospel rappers have to overcome in order to get the message across, because you've got so many pastors that are dead set in some traditionalism, I was going to say monkey ways, but, that they're not allowing God to implement and use a tool that he has constructed to reach the youth. Yeah. Because this Christian rap music, our people, especially black people, like to move. They like to dance. Yeah. And see, the beat in the music will attract them, and the lyrics in the music will influence and change them. Yeah. So God has a method in which to reach. That's why you got the secular thing is people there are trends set by trendsetters, and they do it to control the people. That's why the Bible says, be careful what you hear, because what you hear can influence the way you act and behave. That's right. And that's where the importance of gospel rap music comes in, to counteract the secular music that's being filtered out and placed into the hearts and the minds of our youth today, and it's influencing and impacting them in a negative way.
And so in a real sense, we're getting ready for our second commercial break, and we'll come back, Mr. Williams. We'll start with you, and we'll have you to elaborate upon some of the things that we've already spoken of. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking about the impact of rap music on the impact of Christian music on our secular and rap experiences. And Mr. Williams will now give us some information in reference to some of the things that we've already talked about in dealing with the negative impact of rap music, and that will be followed by, on down the line with Mr. Polo, and Pastor Walker will sort of wrap it up for us.
I think what's good to note is, just like Pastor Walker said, that a lot of us were secular artists, Polo and I, before we formed Trill, truly reaching every acceptable level, Romans, 12, 1 and 2, it's where that comes from. And we try to present our bodies as living sacrifices, wholly acceptable unto God, which is our reasonable service. So, but we were secular rappers, and we realized the detriment of our lyrics and our ways, and we wanted to, if I can't listen to it with my daughter, then I don't need to even perform it. I don't need to be attached to it. And I don't play it in my car. If I can't, my grandmother can't sit back there and be like, son, what is this? So what a lot of those Christian rappers have done, or gospel artists are doing, they've come from the secular music. They realized the error of their way, and they're like, okay, well, I can still do this as an artist. I can still operate in my gift, and it gets God glory. And that's where we stand at Trill. And we do that in such a way to influence our young people, to outreach in the community, and make sure that we're treating the elderly like we're supposed to, like the Bible teaches us to. And I used to be that troubled teen that listened to that music, and there was a particular segment of music called Bone Thugs and Harmony, real quick. And if you looked at the imagery on that album, East 99, Eternal is what it was called. If you flip it over, in the back corners, in the four corners of the very back of the disc, it had 4 demons. And then it had like ancient writings. And if you put it in a mirror, you had to go put it in a mirror, and it was a curse. And you would read it. And I remember reading it, when I was like 17. I remember reading it. And at 19, I hit prison. I went wild at 17, 19, not understanding what I was going through. It wasn't until years later that I understood that this is spiritual. And they understood it, and that album went platinum times over, so, and a lot of teenagers went wild. And I think that we have to really be careful of what we allow into our bodies, into our spirit, whether that's music or food. It's just really, God created us with a better purpose.
And so in reality, this music really has the kind of negative impact that people generally associate with that music. Is that right?
Yeah, it does. It really, I remember when I was younger, and our older generation would say, son, what do you listen to? That's devil's music. And I'm thinking, man, you crazy. You got to be crazy. This is it. This is NWA. Not even understanding they had their ends with an attitude. You already, just in the title alone tells you, okay, I'm one of them too. I need to have an attitude. And I got one, and not even understanding that it's shaping my life. It's shaping my destiny. And it also almost ended mine, but God had grace on me. And now, knowing that I erred, I want to make sure that my life is not lived in vain. I want to be out here, and I want to make sure we can pull as many young people out of the fire as possible.
Polo?
Yes, sir. I remember, and I can go into this with a real quick story. I remember secular, and I had people tell me so many times, that maybe I should start doing gospel rap. And I'm like, well, I'm going to give God all of me, and I want to get this album done. You know what I'm saying? Let me do this first. And not realizing all the HE hockey sticks I was putting myself through. But one day I had my daughter, my nephew, and I had another little young man with me, because I always keep young children around me. And I was making a mixtape. So I'm, lyrically I was always nice. So I'm in there getting it in, doing my thing. And right afterwards, I looked down and I had my notebook. And I looked at my notebook and I realized some writing in my notebook. It was a rhyme that was wrote in my notebook, but it was mediocre. So it wasn't me, but it was wrote like in the same form that I write. So I read it. and it was talking about, it said the N-word, it talked about the game, the hustling game. No real cuss words in it, but the rhymes, rhymed. And I was like, okay, but who writing my notebook? Because my nephew had his own notebook, so I knew it wasn't him. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's this little boy that wants to rap. Okay, I thought it was cool. So I got in the car, and my daughter, at this time, she was 10 years old. And she said, Daddy, did you like the rap that I wrote? And I said, you wrote that in my notebook? And she said, yeah. And I said, baby, I got a question, though. I said, what do you know about the game? She said, only what I hear from you. And that hit me so hard, because God will show you you. So all this time, I'm not listening to what he's trying to tell me. He knew what to use to finally get me to understand what he was trying to tell me. And I said, wow. I said, baby, listen, is this something that you really want to do? She said, yeah, I just want to rap with you. I said, well, I will only support you in this if you start telling the truth. So at that point in time, God spoke to me and he told me this. He said, Polo, I didn't tell you to stop dancing. I just want you to change partners. That's it.
When you change your mind, you change your grind.
And from that day on, that's what it is. And my daughter's finna graduate now. She's graduating high school, and I'm proud of my baby. I just had to put that out there.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time,
I also have a graduate myself.
and what I love about it is through that, she has really, when I talk about a prayer warrior, a soldier for Christ, ever since I started walking like I was supposed to be walking, my daughter's been walking it even harder.
Train them up.
And that showed me, God showed me that everything in his word is so for real. I can't do nothing but walk in faith. I've been shot 6 times. I've been stabbed 12. I know what the streets will do to you. You see what I'm saying? I know what the streets will make you believe and think that it's cool to believe that way. I understand it. I've been homeless. I've been without. And I've had what these cats talk about having. I've had all of that. And then now, I don't have anything to show for it except my life. And when I realized how precious that was, because when I'm sitting behind a cage for 5 years, not ever thinking I'm ever going to get out, and just by luck of the draw, I was supposed to do 15. That wasn't nothing but God. Never told on nobody, never did any of that. I did exactly what I thought I was supposed to be doing in the streets. And God got me about that situation. Every situation that I put myself in, he's done that. So when we talk about this rap music, when we talk about this evil that men do and how we were tricked, we have to realize that without God, none of this, it's impossible. And it says without faith, it's impossible to please him. And I've learned that through that. I've learned that through this walk. So with that being said, if I could say anything to anybody, is, again, change your mind, you change your grind. Again, we go to 12:2. It says, don't be conformed.
Be transformed by the
Be
renewing of your mind.
transformed. And that's what it's about now. It's about transforming, and that's what we're here to do, is to inform. And Pastor Walker talked about the church, and our thing is we want our people to stop being scared. It's time to stop being scared for real, because again, we can talk a lot when we're behind the pulpit. We can talk a lot when we're inside a building. But if you see so many people that are dying inside the church, it's showing you now that the enemy is coming in. The enemy's been there. Amen. Now it's time for us to go there. That's what it's called outreach for. Amen. So it's ministry, and with ministry divides misery. I'm sorry.
Let me say something real quick, because and that's important to me. They've got a project. You got a CD, right? You got a copy of that?
Yeah, I gave it to Dr. Henderson off the
well,
shelf.
they got a CD out, and what I want to really encourage, other pastors to allow gospel rap to come into the church, because you got youth in the church, and you got to attract the youth, and gospel rap is attracting the youth, and allow that to get in there. They've got a project out here that
it's called Jesus Music.
Jesus Music, and
it's actually going to be due in December. It'll be on all the iTunes and stores and all that.
Okay, and of course we've got about 26 seconds before we end this show for today. But let me thank the 3 of you for coming by and giving us that excellent information and giving us some perspective in terms of the detrimental impact that this music really has. Absolutely. Because I think sometimes people believe that we're sort of exaggerating in reference to it, but what you're telling us today is that that music is for real in terms of its evil, the things that it produces that are not conducive to good living. And
Right.
I want to thank all three of you for bringing that information.
Thank you, Dr.
And let me
Smith.
encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.
Sundays and
On Saturdays and Sundays.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was on Saturday.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is capital punishment in Tennessee, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about capital punishment in Tennessee, Dr. LWoods. Dr. Woods has a lot of information in reference to capital punishment in Tennessee, and I think, Dr. Woods, you've been with us on a number of occasions, and I want to tell you how much we appreciate you coming by and dealing with us today.
I'm pleased to be here, Dr. Haney. It's a very timely topic, unfortunately always is, with the crime in our society and what we should be doing about it, and I'm honored to be here.
Very good, and I appreciate you too, Dr. Woods. But before we get started with capital punishment in Tennessee, Dr. Woods, let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of bringing you to us this morning, and then we'll get into doing the second segment into capital punishment in Tennessee 2014.
Well, I can do that pretty quickly. I'm a Nashville guy, as you know, born in West Virginia, but moved here with my family when I was 3 or 2 years old, and been here ever since, except for school. I spent 4 years in Atlanta going to college, and 3 years in Chicago at law school, and have practiced law here essentially ever since, as well as taught constitutional law at Tennessee State University, as you well know. I think the formative influences for me, my brother Frank, who was at Vanderbilt Law School a couple years ahead of me, called me one day saying there was a notice up from a guy named Senator Avon Williams, that many of your viewers will know by reputation, needing research assistance on the death penalty in Tennessee. And my brother knew I had taken a course about it in law school, so he volunteered to help Senator Williams, called me for some research or ideas or focus, and that got me really interested, I think, in the death penalty and capital punishment. The course has been very academic, of course, and lawyer-oriented, but reading the stories of both the victims and the defendants in death penalty cases in Tennessee really brought it home to me. Then through the influence of people like Reginald Stewart and Robert I. Alexander and Dr. Charles Kimbrough, I got very involved in representing the NAACP on a regional basis in Tennessee, and they were involved in many of the death penalty cases in the 1960s and later in the 1970s. So my legal background, courses in this area, my brother getting me even more interested in the subject, and then working with the NAACP as well as several of the national anti-death penalty organizations really shaped my interest and focused my attention on the problems with punishment in the criminal justice system, and the worst problems are with the worst penalty, the death penalty.
You know, Dr. Woods, what I'd like to do here this morning is to take advantage of your historical knowledge in terms of the death penalty itself and sort of give us a summary. And I think we've got about 2 minutes in this segment, and we'll continue during this second segment. Sort of give us a summary of the death penalty as such in the state of Tennessee, which is to say, looking back over it when it started and the impact that it had, and the kind of information that I'm sure that you generally teach in reference to this.
Well, I do. I teach some televised courses, and I've been interviewed on TV, not only by you several times in the past, but by others on criminal justice and the death penalty. So I've been exposed to it from a number of different points of view. The defendant, the victim or victims, how the system structurally works, and I lecture to my students about the history of capital punishment. Our ideas about capital punishment are really a holdover from Elizabethan England. And sort of like the horror stories you read about medieval torture, that was the idea in the 1500s, 1600s in England. If I accused you of a death penalty offense, you trespassed on my land. You failed to pay your debts on time. You shoplifted, much less more serious offenses like murder. All of those were death penalty offenses at common law in England. And the idea is the royal guard or the police would torture you until you confessed. And if you didn't confess, they'd keep torturing you until you died. And then they would claim, well, look, we were right all along. He's dead, and that proves he was guilty.
We executed him.
Well, we've evolved some from that, but we've done it in the wrong ways and in very inefficient, ineffective, and sometimes simply factually incorrect ways, unfortunately. In Tennessee, as with most, well, the bare majority of the states in this country now authorize the death penalty, and Tennessee has long been one of the states with the death penalty. In 1972, the Supreme Court blocked any death penalty, but then it resumed 4 years later.
Okay, Dr. Woods, let's stop right here for this first commercial break, and then we'll get back during the second segment, and then we'll start in terms of the historical information that you're giving us, because we want it all together, and then we'll be able to move on from that point. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Larry Woods from Tennessee State University, and he's giving us some information relative to the death penalty in the state of Tennessee. Dr. Woods, let's, as we promised, let's pick up where we left off, dealing with sort of a historical statement in reference to the death penalty in the state of Tennessee.
Focusing on Tennessee, before 1978, the death penalty in Tennessee was available for a large number of felony offenses, and it was simply up to the district attorney, the trial judge, and the jury to decide whether the punishment would be death penalty or life imprisonment or a term of years, whether you were talking about murder or rape or armed robbery or any number of other offenses. Then the Supreme Court stepped in 1972 in a case called Furman versus Georgia and ruled and pointed out that for a long time in our history, the death penalty had been used in very discriminatory fashion. The people who were winding up on death row were folks who could not afford a lawyer, who were almost always a minority, African American, Latina, Hispanic, poor white, and there was very little supervision by the courts of who received the death penalty and who didn't. And the best way to illustrate that in Tennessee is typically in the last 3 or 4 decades, we'll have about 1,000 or 1,100 people convicted of murder in our state prison system. Of those approximately 1,100 murderers, only about 100 received the death penalty sentence. And therefore, the idea in theory was we'll sentence to death only the worst of the murderers, the worst of the worst. But the problem was, you know, if I get arrested and I can't afford a lawyer before the 1972 embargo on the death penalty, in theory I'd get an appointed lawyer, but in practice, all up through the 1960s, if I didn't have my own lawyer, I was in desperate trouble. I wasn't going to understand what was going on as the defendant in terms of court procedure, penalties, and the judge wasn't going to be in any position to help me. And therefore, we filled up death rows all over the country, including Tennessee, with people who were not the worst of the worst. I'm not saying they were angels, I'm saying they weren't the worst of the worst. The Supreme Court got very concerned we were putting innocent people on death row, which we were in at least about 6 to 8% of the cases. That doesn't sound like a lot till you stop and realize that any time on death row in modern times, we've got 3,000 to 4,000 people. So we're talking about a very large number of innocent people at that point. So the court finally in 1976 said if states, including Tennessee, will follow certain procedures, they can reinstitute the death penalty. Our legislature passed a new death penalty in 1978. It was then declared unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court. Finally, about 1979, we got a death penalty created by the legislature that the courts, that the DAs, that the system could use. And that system essentially says juries will determine whether a convicted murderer faces the death penalty or life in prison without parole, that's a newer fashion of it, or a term of years. And the jury can only determine that if the jury gets proper guidance from the lawyers and the judge, proper guidance being, are there aggravating circumstances? Aggravating circumstances in a murder case would be, if I'm the perpetrator, did I kill a police officer? Did I kill a correctional officer? Did I kill a public official? Did I kill a very elderly person or a very young person? In other words, the worst of the worst kind of murders. Juries have to weigh aggravating factors versus mitigating factors. What would be a mitigating factor if I'm that perpetrator? Well, maybe I suffer from mental disease. Perhaps I'm mentally retarded. Perhaps I'm a juvenile who's following the lead of an older person who's the primary instigator, perpetrator of the terrible crimes we're talking about. If I have mitigating factors, jury's supposed to weigh the mitigating factors against the aggravating factors. The idea here is it's not just up to the jury by whatever whim or personal background they have to impose a death penalty. They've got to weigh the death penalty versus life in prison without parole based on aggravating factors, based on mitigating factors. And there are 15 or 20 aggravating factors in Tennessee. I've only mentioned a few of them. Another one, for example, would be I've committed crimes of personal violence that I've been convicted of before this murder.
In other words, Dr. Woods, there's a list you're telling us where the jury can look at 12 or 15 items and sort of check off which should apply. Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly right. And therefore, we have what we call bifurcated trials in a death penalty case. We have one hearing, one trial to determine guilt or innocence. If I'm innocent, case is over, I go home. If I'm guilty, then usually the next day, we'll start the second trial with the same jury to hear whether there are aggravating or mitigating factors. And therefore, a jury has to decide two decisions in a death penalty case in Tennessee. Number one, am I guilty of first-degree murder? We don't have the death penalty for other offenses. All the other offenses in the state are going to be life in prison or a term of years. It's only first-degree murder. Second decision every jury has to make in a death penalty case is, are there aggravating factors and do they outweigh mitigating factors? If the answer is that yes, then the jury may impose the death penalty. In other words, the court's saying, jury, we want you to identify the worst murderers that will receive the death penalty, and you can identify them by following this checklist. We also have some limiting rules. The Supreme Court has ruled over the last 25 years, you cannot sentence a defendant who's mentally impaired, who can't understand the nature and quality of what he did, to the death penalty. You can sentence him to a home, a hospital for the criminally insane, but not to the death penalty. Or you can sentence him for other mental treatment if that's appropriate kind of thing. So there are limits, and then there's this checklist, as you very accurately called it, that guides the jury in their deliberations. But the key to all that is that both sides have a competent lawyer. Because, you know, if you and I are the opposing lawyers, we know going into the case, what we're going to argue is the issue of guilt or innocence. Then if it's guilty, what we're going to argue are mitigating factors versus aggravating factors. We're going to call witnesses for each of those issues, put that proof on to the jury. If we don't have competent lawyers on both sides, then you get what has happened far too many times in Tennessee. I've litigated these cases, unfortunately, no. You get a defense lawyer who has no experience, no qualifications, no knowledge about death penalty litigation, and they drop the ball. Be like, you know, anything else where I'm using an expert, if he or she doesn't have expertise, they're not going to do the job the law requires.
Very good. Of course, let us take this break. I think this is an appropriate time. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to attorney Larry Woods from Tennessee State University, who's given us some information relative to the history of the death penalty in the state of Tennessee. And as we indicated, Dr. Woods, let's see if we can broaden that by giving you an opportunity over the last segment here to sort of bring in as much information you wish to bring in reference to the death penalty, as well as some of the ideas in reference to what people would like to do in reference to the death penalty.
Well, let me start by saying the two large legal issues that have framed the death penalty in recent years have been what we just finished talking about, aggravating factors, guidance for the jury, and that's in place in the 32 or so states that enforce the death penalty. The second large idea that's right on the cusp now, getting debated in the Tennessee legislature, going to be litigated in the U.S. Supreme Court and a lot of other states,